Faithful God, open the words of Scripture to us in a fresh and exciting way. In Jesus' name we ask it. Amen. I wonder if you have ever searched for something with all your heart, something really important to you. For 12 years we lived in Timaru, and a great outing for the kids was going to the dump. I used to bribe the kids. I'd say, if you help me at the dump, then I'll buy you an ice cream. One particular day, a man was offloading his trailer beside ours, and like most dumps, it had a maybe 6 foot, maybe a bit lower, concrete pit that you'd push all your rubbish into. Anyway, this man beside me looked terribly worried. He looked frantic, so I asked him. I said, "What's the problem?" He said, "I've lost my wedding ring. It's somewhere in my pile of rubbish." So while he was offloading his trailer, he'd offloaded his wedding ring as well. So I locked the kids in the car so they didn't run around, and the two of us got into the pit and we started looking for his wedding ring. All the time we were frantically waving at the front-end loader driver so he didn't come and front-end load us. The man was frantic. He said, "My wife will kill me. I must find my ring." So he set to work, and all the while he grew more and more desperate. Talk about a needle in a haystack. Did we find the ring? Did the kids get an ice cream? You'll need to wait to the end of the sermon to find out. I wonder if you've ever searched for something with all your heart. In the Gospel, Jesus presents us with lots of heartfelt searches. There's the woman who loses the coin, and you'll remember she sweeps the house frantically. There's the shepherd who loses the sheep, and today is the pearl of great price, and also the treasure. The one pearl that is worth more than all the others, and so he sells everything he owns just to buy it. So transfixed is he with the pearl that he gives up everything else just to have this one treasure. And oh, the joy he discovers when he finds it. Whether it's a wedding ring, a lost coin, a lost sheep, treasure in a field, the pearl of great price, they are all have a searcher. They all have the searching with their whole heart, and in the end, unparalleled joy when they're discovered. But what is it that God searches for today with all his heart? What is it that God puts all his effort into finding? What is it that gives God joy beyond all measure at finding? Well, last week we baptised Madeline. The family have a long connection with St. Peter's. They love it here. And the father, Brooke, texted me after the service to thank me for what a wonderful service it was. And he said, "Send my greetings and thanks to all the people of St. Peter for such a wonderful service." And he said, yes, because I'd asked him. He said, "Yes, you can have our baby for the baby Jesus at Christmas." I always like to plan ahead. The baptism service begins with a wonderful piece from Scripture. We love because God first loved us. Before Madeline's parents reached out to God, God was reaching out to them. Before Madeline was even conscious, God was loving her. However long her life is, God will always love her. And when she dies, God will go on loving her. We love because God first loved us. There is, as Paul reminds us in our reading this morning, nothing that in all creation that can separate us from the love of God. So what is it that God searches for with all of his heart? What is it that God puts all his effort into finding? What is it that gives God joy beyond all measure at finding? The answer is so simple. You and me. Before you were born, God's love was searching for you. God puts everything into finding you, not even withholding the life of his own dear Son in order to bring you home. And what joy God has when we are finally found. God even finds us when we don't want to be found. Tim was at high school when God found him. He'd heard on the grapevine that his uncle had got religion, so the rest of the family said, "Stay away from your uncle." As a pilot, Tim's uncle would often fly through the city and need to stay a couple of days, layover, and so they saw him frequently. Tim recalls he spent a whole year trying to avoid his uncle. Then one night his parents left town and he was all alone with him at home. So he had a pretty great night planned. He had cases of beer stashed in the bushes outside, and for the first time in his life he was going to go out with a girl with a bad reputation. In spite of these things, his uncle cornered him on the couch and proceeded to tell him all about Jesus. He was waiting for his friend Brian to come and pick him up. Brian didn't come, he didn't come, he didn't come. His uncle kept blabbing on. Somewhere in the middle of the conversation, he doesn't even remember what his uncle said, but it caught Tim's attention, and Tim listened. He was going out that night to find fulfillment for the achy emptiness he had inside of him. He was only 16, but he knew that feeling of emptiness inside him. Tim realised that what his uncle was talking about was exactly what he needed in his life. He got up and he went to the other side of the house. He took himself into his bedroom and he closed the door. He knelt down to pray. He'd never actually knelt down to pray ever before. He doesn't remember exactly what he prayed, but he asked Jesus to be the leader of his life, guide him through his life. Tim finished praying and he sat back on his heels and he remembers looking up at the ceiling and he had two thoughts. I don't hear organ music and there's no beams of light coming through the ceiling. Brian never did show up and his annoying uncle had changed his life. Today, Tim doesn't have that achy feeling inside anymore. He loves weightlifting, target shooting, spending time with his wife and children, and the peace and the joy of being a Christian. Dunedin hymn writer Colin Gibson writes a hymn called "How Much Am I Worth?" It goes like this: "How much am I worth? What values in me do I count? If I stand or I fall, if I'm weak or I'm strong, if I win or I lose, am I someone or no one at all?" And then the refrain, "I am worth everything, everything, everything. I am worth everything in the eyes of God." The next verse, "I am that bird that dropped to the ground, the tiniest bird of them all, and nobody knew and nobody cared, but our Father who cares for us all." And then the refrain, "I am worth everything, everything, everything. I am worth everything in the eyes of God." Next verse, "I am that stone that fell from a ring that was precious beyond all compare, and they hunted the house, they cried out with joy when they saw it still gleaming down there." Then the chorus, which you know. Next verse, "I am that child who was lost and afraid when she saw just how far she had roamed, but they scoured the hills till they found her again, and rejoicing they brought her safe home." How much am I worth? Do I matter at all? When I'm thinking it through, may I see that I'm worth all the love of the Son of God who laid down his life just for me. So your homework this week is really easy. Allow God to find you. Allow God to find you. And that ring at the dump, well, after a good 15 minutes of searching and with help from the front-end loader man, we found it. And with pure joy, he held it up. "This is it," he said. "We've found it." He was so grateful. And finally, the children got to have their ice creams.